We got a couple more people coming in just now. All right. So, welcome everybody. Happy December. Very happy to have you all with us this evening. So we're going to jump right in. You see, we still got some more people that are slowly coming into the meeting, but I'm pretty sure that those folks will be able to catch up without a problem. So for starters, we're going to go into an update on the Act 173 implementation. And I guess, Sue, I will turn that over to you if you don't mind.
Sure. So this item is on the agenda to basically to prepare you for the possible need for a discussion in January on the VSBA's position. Just let me move one thing here so I can see better. Position on delaying implementation of Act 173. And I think you're all probably very familiar with Act 173. It was enacted in 2018 and implementation has been delayed previously because of the pandemic. And it's currently scheduled to take effect on July 1, 2022. Just to refresh your memory, it strives to enhance the effectiveness, availability, and equity of services provided to all students who require additional supports. And that includes students that receive special education services, but it also includes students that do not receive special education services. So to support the delivery of this model, the bill changes the funding model for special education, changes it from a reimbursement model to a census-based model, which provides more flexibility in the funding and is aligned with the state's policy priorities of serving students that require additional support. To accomplish the goals of Act 173, significant professional development is needed, training teachers, administrators, and other personnel in the identification and evaluation and provision of educational services to children who require additional supports. And there is some concern that AOE has not provided that professional development and that the pandemic has created some conditions that are not very conducive to adding stressors to educators. So that's why a possible delay in Act 173 is being considered. Right now, I can tell you that the Act 173 advisory group met on Monday. I'm part of that advisory group. And we agreed that we're going to convene a stakeholder group in December that's going to develop some possible scenarios regarding the delay of all or possibly part of the current implementation timeline. And one of those scenarios, I think, would also be no delay at all. So it would be a number of possible scenarios. So VSBA will be a part of that stakeholder group. The goal really is to flesh out the different options and present them to the full advisory group at its January 3rd meeting. For further exploration, and it's possible that the full advisory group may take position on a formal recommendation at that meeting. This board meets again on January 12th. So at that time, you would have the chance to look at the advisory group's options, and if it has any recommendations, you would have those as well. But since I'm part of the advisory group, I wanted to have this on the agenda tonight to just give you an update and get any feedback from the board that would inform my input to the advisory group.
All right, thank you, Sue. So I see a hand up. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. So I've been requested by a couple of Windham County boards to request that we advocate for another year postponement, mainly until some form of the pupil waiting report is implemented. They're going to see somewhere, my own district is, my own SU is going to see something in the neighborhood of $600,000 hit, but we've been planning for it. So we're not in bad shape, but a lot of the other SUs in the area have not been. So they're going to see somewhere in the range of $500 to $1 million reduction in revenues, and their tax base can't support making up that difference. So I told them I would bring it up. So
Thanks, Mark. Dave Sharp, go ahead.
So our situation's opposite of Mark's. We're going to be hit fairly substantially with the weighting study, regardless of how it's implemented. And we will be helped to a certain extent, depending on the details with Act 173. So as far as we're concerned, a timely implementation of 173 is appropriate.
Thanks. Any other? Tara, go ahead.
I'm just concerned that with preparing our budgets, if if our financial managers or per se or business managers try using the block formula, and then it gets postponed a year, is that going to throw off our budgets that are having to be approved in January for town meeting for most of us in March?
Jim Salzgiver.
Yeah, just wanted to raise one item that may be a little different than some others, but we've been trying to plan for the implementation of 173 for a while, so we're kind of we're decently prepared for that. But one issue that's big in our area that isn't really, I believe, addressed at this point is independent schools and their charges for special ed services. That I think it still lacks a bit of clarity as to to what extent that independent schools will have to live by the same sort of rules as public schools, and that's sort of a concern for us down the road.
Thanks, Jim. Kim, go ahead.
I think my comment is that I would not encourage, even if there were to be a delay in 173, and I'm sort of agnostic in that at this point. I understand the challenges of the pandemic. I really think we need to recognize by the time that would happen, to Tara's point, budgets will have been factored and planned for. So I don't know how quickly that could be signaled to change that planning. Essex Westford doesn't vote till April, but most others are needing to be ready before the legislature would be ready to take action. So I put that out there, but I would say if there were to be a delay in 173, there should not be a delay in the how it impacts independent schools. That both have been delayed already. So.
All right, thank you, Kim. Anyone? Mark Clough, go ahead.
RSU is going to be very significantly affected by the block grant with 173. And we're lobbying very hard at the AOE and the legislature to put this off for a year until they can figure out the weighting study. I'm not sure as a group we're going to agree, and maybe that's fine, of course, but maybe we won't come up with a recommendation. But just FYI, we're in a really bad way with this.
Thank you for that. Anyone else with comments on this one? Sue, do you think that maybe gives you a little bit of flavor of what you need at this stage?
Yeah, I suspect that the stakeholder group that's going to be working on this, it's a pretty wide variety of people, and it's probably going to have a lot of the same concerns that were just mentioned. I took note of all of them.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments on this one before we move on to the next agenda topic? Okay.
I just want to add my voice to this only because we're such a large district, and Megan Roy has been instrumental So we are super prepared for that transition and have been wanting it for years. But I just also want to acknowledge the differences of perspective in the state, and clearly a challenge. And I know there's anxiety about the weighting study. So I look forward to future conversations. Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen. Any other input before we move on?
Neil, Mark Clough has his hand up. I don't know if that's from before.
I think it's from before. There it goes. Okay, thanks, folks. We're going to move on then to the next item, which is an NSBA update. You'll see that update included in your packet, but I think I will turn it over to Sue once again, just to add a little bit of flavor to that.
Sure. So there is some information in your packet about the new executive director of the NSBA. His name is Dr. John Heim, and he's the former executive director of the Kansas Association of School Boards, where he served as executive director for 11 years. I also sent you a memo last night that I received last night from NSBA with an update on how the NSBA board is planning to move forward. And I can also tell you that I'm going to be attending a meeting of the Northeast region executive directors tomorrow and Friday. And part of that meeting is going to include a session with the new executive director, Dr. Heim. So I think I'm going to learn more in the next few days at that meeting. And I'm certainly happy to provide you with another update after that. But what you have in your packet, plus the memo that I emailed to you last night, is really the latest information.
Any board members, sorry, any board members have any questions, comments on this one? All right, we are moving right along tonight, folks. Thank you so much. So Act 1 Ed Quality Standards Review, we've had a VSBA subcommittee working very hard on this. So I want to turn it over to them for an update on that subcommittee report.
Thank you, Neil. Sue asked me to update you guys since our last meeting. First, I want to start by thanking Colleen and Gaston, who took a lot of the work in making the last draft to go out to the subgroup of Act 1, and Amy and Sue also helped a lot too. So thank you for that. After the meeting of October 15, the subcommittee met again and created a new document with using really pointing out that VSBA, the Superintendent Association, and the Vermont Principals Association, we all pretty much were aligned in our feedback. And then with that, we did some recommended language to the different if you guys had a chance to see it, we stayed in the same colors that we had shown you before, that we were staying current with language, that we were doing a systematic approach and connecting with professional educator standards. So what we did was just, again, send them some suggested language, hoping we didn't have a chance to sit with them and work on the document, but we're hoping that they're going to take our input, and we are hoping that this this changes would create more of a systematic change. So it's not like focusing one individual group or one individual characteristic. So I don't know if Colleen or Gaston, but I know Gaston is not here with us today, but we've provided all the supplemental information. They haven't met yet. So we really are just waiting to hear back from them, and hoping that, especially that side-by-side comparison between all of the groups was helpful to them and would help them, see the alignment on perspectives from our organizations. Anything else? And if you guys have questions, please, by all means, we're here. We can answer them.
And thank you, Flora, for your leadership on this project. So,
no,
thank you.
Yeah. It was fun. It was more work than we anticipated, but it was really, it's totally worth it. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with them. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight that as well too. That was a lot of, I saw the output of the subcommittee. And so that was a lot of time spent and a lot of great work. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I see Kim has a hand up, so I'll go to Kim.
So I'm appreciative of the broad lens put on this, just because this will eventually come to the State Board of Ed, and it'll be helpful to know the stakeholders that have been involved in the recommendations coming forward, to ensure that we don't end up recreating the wheel and trying to unpack things. So I'm just really grateful for this front end work that's happening in the other hat I wear. So thanks.
And at this point, I would encourage folks, if they do have questions, to ask them, because we're also waiting for our next attendees to join us for the Employer Commissioner site. And I see they're not quite with us yet. So Dave, go ahead with a long-winded question.
I can talk a lot if I have to. So I just screwed up somehow. I too am appreciative of the work, and I did look it over, although I didn't have time to, or take the time or the effort to review all the work the committee did. I did seem to get a sense that there was an emphasis on bringing private schools into line with education quality standards, and I appreciate that effort. I think that's way overdue. And am I understanding the edits correctly, that you did enhance or emphasize that more than the original document?
Yeah, we did, but basically not to try to pick on the private schools, right? It was just to all, because the quality standards apply to all. So yes, we emphasize that for all. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for the committee, Kim?
So in just thinking about the crosswalk for where we are with the 2200 rules, I'm just saying that out loud. So if there's more conversation to have around the independent school rules, I would not want to have those go to final and have something come that should have been anticipated, if there's a way to consider that. And I know, Sue, you and I sit in both places, and you more intensely than I. So just putting a pin in us thinking about any red flags that show up in where we are in the rules for 2200, as it would potentially be impacted by this, because 173 created two categories of independent schools: those that are approved and those approved to receive public dollars. So we also have a little challenge happening in that out-of-state independents may not be the same jurisdiction to hold them to the standards as it relates to qualifying for public dollars, because the State Board of Ed has jurisdiction over Vermont schools, and we do currently send money to schools out of state that may be approved in their state, but may not meet the standards that would otherwise qualify them for receiving public dollars. So I just raise all of that to mess things up and say things to think about and figure out if there's anything to do about it.
Thanks, Kim. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think quite simply, if you're getting Vermont tax dollars, you have to meet Vermont education quality standards, and certainly we can enforce those in terms of sending tax dollars to any school. And I think that ought to be the guidepost that we use. Private and independent schools have gotten away with with not necessarily delivering for many years. And it's about time they were brought into line with the requirements that we all have to deal with in public schools. One of the things that's come to light to me recently is that there's been a lot of controversy in the state over the high spending threshold, and as far as I know, vouchers and tuitioning situations are included in the calculation for an average, a spending average. And if you look at some independent schools, while they're living on supposedly a voucher of 15,000, what they're actually spending on educating the pupils in their charge is more like 20,000. And so they're artificially using their calculation of the voucher at 15,000 to set our high spending threshold, is actually putting undue pressure on public schools to spend the 20 grand equivalent that private schools are spending, because they can raise money elsewhere. So I think how the high spending threshold is calculated as the legislature revisits that this session is critically important. And what we ought to use for average spending is the average spending of public schools in the state.
Thanks, Dave. I'm going to go to Colleen, and not because I don't like Colleen, but because my dog is whining in the background. While Colleen's talking, I'm going to let the dog out and go to the bathroom, and I will be right back.
Okay, I guess I need to talk for a little bit. I just wanted to go back to the term of school. What the subcommittee noticed, the VSBA subcommittee noticed, is that the use of the term school was very inconsistent throughout the document. And so our initial interest was in raising that as a concern, that whoever was working on the document needed to go back and add clarity about the term school. And so we were not stepping out of our box and taking a position, because the VSBA full board did not say take a position on this. We were just trying to add, to highlight that there was a language discrepancy throughout the document. So I think it was above our pay grade to take a stand on that. But I know Sue's been very involved with 2200 rules. So I just wanted to acknowledge that the committee was not taking positions that would have necessarily big policy impact. It was positions of, okay, you're paying attention to a school. Well, what is a school? Define it for us, because it's used 5 different ways throughout the entire document. And it was a similar concern for how we approached language related to curriculum. There was inconsistency in some of the language. And so, that's why Gaston's idea of bringing in the legal authority was very helpful. So that far right column is the legal authority, so that we were not, encouraging the EQS group to not stray far from what's already on the books. So I just wanted to add that as a, the nuance of the conversation about what a school is. And that the subcommittee did not take a strong stand. I don't think we did.
I was just hoping, Colleen, since you brought that up, I'd love to understand a little bit more how it was using school in a different way, throughout the document. I'm not sure I quite understand.
It was just the definition. So they might use the term technical schools. They might say this applies to, and they would list types of schools. And so they might list technical schools in one place, but it's nowhere else. They might say private and public schools, and then they might say private, public, independent schools. And so there was, language that was pre-Act 46. So that's just some rough examples.
Yeah, Jim, if you go to page 4 of that document, you can see it. So if you go on page 4, the lower column, the far right column, like Colleen was saying, Gaston had this idea of putting the law there. And that's why, you know, it's listed 2200 is listed there, but we didn't mean to meet the work that the State Board of Education is doing right now, and the rules should stay independent of this work is really important right now. What we're trying to get is the language right, and this is for outcomes for all kids, but it shouldn't be hauled off from the work with private or independent schools, right? Or where we were trying to highlight is for all schools. But Colleen explained it much better.
Did it make any sense what they were trying to do by identifying different types of schools in different sections? You know, like technical schools is a whole different category, and independent schools and all. I was just trying to figure out whether that was intentional or just sloppy.
It was hard. It was hard to tell, really, and it's throughout the document. So you can speak to this, because this is why we were trying to.
Yeah, to me, it almost seemed like different people worked on different parts, and there wasn't anyone who actually looked at it as comprehensively as one document or something, because it just didn't match up. I don't think it was done on purpose. I think it was just turned out that way.
Okay, thanks.
Kim, go ahead.
Do they, is there an attorney from the AOE working on it as well?
No.
No. So this working group has no legal.
Well, Heather Boucher is part of the group, right? So Heather.
She's not an attorney, though.
I know, but you know, in theory, I would hope that she is trying to talk to somebody, but no.
Okay. So at some point, there'll be technical support needed. I think the issue of out-of-state independence is one that may need another, like an independent legal opinion. Just the section of the law they're looking at to say was kind of left behind is this, I don't know, section 828, which speaks to out-of-state, like paying tuition to out-of-state independent schools, and it doesn't qualify it. So it'd be worth trying to see if there are other places that jump out at us that might need legislative fix as well. Because while I think the legislature is going to be asked not to do new initiatives for school districts, there will be some things happening coming up, like I think an update to chapter 11, which is unified union school districts.
But I believe, Sue, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at the last meeting, Amanda did mention that, you know, this document is going over, they got some funding, and I was hoping that what it was going is was exactly for that. So for some legal review. Mark Hage does, you know, he's a lawyer too, but he sits in that committee, in the writing committee too. But I understood that they got some money to make sure that the document was going to get reviewed, but we'll hear back from them.
Okay, Colleen, you got something else?
Yeah, just one more piece. And I think the Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators is implicated as well. You know, Kim, as long as you're thinking about the state board role and so forth. But the Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators, they're the ones that did the teacher and leadership standards, and it's almost 10 years since they worked on it last. But so, you know, the rules related to that, I think, are implicated, certainly, like what's required of an educator, what kind of curriculum do they need pre-service and so forth, so that they're prepared, and then what's the ongoing professional development. So I believe there are going to be implications there also.
And I'm sure with consideration for, I know, I think Flora's also been involved with the diversifying educator workforce body of work and thinking about how that impacts that piece. So what a web we weave.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to, at least in my mind, is that the document doesn't feel just driven by one group, right? So this one group is getting to see the document, but what would be the systematic approach that we keep talking about is that we can achieve the goals of Act 1, but we also enhance education for all, right? So like we look at it systematic and from all the groups. So that is not just by adding language from one group. So hopefully that's what's going to happen. We're going to make the EQS stronger and better.
And certainly, like, as we've all, or as certainly I've come to learn, when the rules are open, they're open. So if, as they come forward with recommendations, they've not thought about it more broadly, they're open. So somebody's going to have thought about the piece that they're most interested in. I'm really grateful for this holistic approach to it, so that it doesn't feel piecemeal and it feels more broadly considered. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you. And with that, I am going to move us along in the agenda because I do see that we've got a few of the employer commissioners with us this evening for an update on the status of bargaining, the arbitration award. So with us this evening, just as a reintroduction for folks, we've got Elizabeth Fitzgerald, one of the chairs of the employer commissioners, our very own Adrian Raymond, who is VSBA board member, but also an employer commissioner. We've got Mark Koenig, and Joe McNeil is with us as well too. Did I miss somebody? I think that is the group. And so do I want to, Elizabeth, am I turning it over to you at this point?
Yes, Neil, I will kick it off. Yes, I'll start.
Before you do, Elizabeth, just wanted to ask you, Neil, at which point you wanted me to turn off the recording.
You are too kind, Sue. You should have done it because I forgot to chime in and you already had reminded me. So yeah, let's turn it off now. And for board. All right. So board members, we're going to move on in our agenda. And next up is an update on the Vermont Community Foundation Equity Grant. And I think
Thanks, Neil.
Sandra might be able to take care of that for us.
Yes, and it'll be brief, but we wanted to keep you updated on our work. So we have been engaged with both consulting groups. In terms of the Insight Education Group, we're working on ongoing resources for members and the consultancy services that you probably read about in the weekly update, which is available for immediate needs. So far, IEG has provided support to 4 school districts. In terms of the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Inclusion, we have met twice as an equity leadership team. So the 6 folks from the 3 associations and then 2 members of the Vermont Partnership group have met together discussing current events and challenges and really, I would say, doing a lot of reflecting and building our kind of getting a framework of where we want to go next. So that's happening at the same time. We have a 3rd person from Vermont Partnership who's been working closely with me on policy. And we have worked to prioritize policies that we believe will need a review with an equity lens. What's happening right now is I will meet with this person from Vermont Partnership and then also meet with the Vsba policy review team and share that information back and forth. We've also had one meeting of all of us together to talk about how to move forward as we approach the work of marrying recommendations from an equity perspective and also upholding legal frameworks. So that's the process that we're going through right now. And if it's okay to just share my screen quickly, I wanted to show you visually that work. Is that okay to do? Neil, okay. Let's see. I think it's this one. Can you see that okay? Oh, let me switch to Can you see the color chart?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So it may not make sense to you at this very quick glance, but I would say one of the trickiest things about the work is keeping track of where we're at. And this is all of the policies that we are currently working on, all of the model policies. So anything that's in green, I had prioritized as a first review with our policy group because either it hadn't been reviewed for some time, or I was getting a lot of questions from members, or something in statute signaled that we needed to look at it with our Vsba legal team. So that's where we started. And then I had another group that would be the second round, and those are in the blue. And then now we have this third group, which is all those policies that also we would like to be considered through an equity lens. So that's this pink column, and it overlaps. So some of them are prioritized and they need a review through equity. And so this is my attempt to try to keep track of it all, and a quick glance for all of us working in this group together of where do we stand on all of this. So I just show you this visually because I want you to have ready in your knowledge of what's happening, the amount of work that's going on. So I can stop sharing that. And then let me see if there's anything else I want to tell you. Oh, the only other thing I would say is I've drafted a work plan that would take us through the next year. So our grant work we anticipate will wrap up next December 2022. And within that amount of time, part of our RFP was to engage stakeholders in collecting feedback around policies, and that's going to take some time. So I've created a work plan to sort of move us through step by step. How can we accomplish that goal of seeking stakeholder feedback on a few policies by next December? So that's where we are right now. And if Sue, if I left anything out, feel free to jump in.
I don't think you left anything out. Thank you for the update.
Any questions from board members on this work? Colleen, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for this work. I'm just incredibly grateful because I chair a policy committee at our local district, and people are so anxious, and for some reason all of a sudden we're being accused of not having any policies. We've done some crosswalk work through our committee, and I've encouraged patience that the VSBA, that, you know, there's a group working on this. I'm just wondering what can be stated publicly about the work so that we can assure people that we're drawing on our statewide leadership and my facts are correct. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the work with specifically with the equity consultant, Colleen? Yes. Okay. So there, as of today, I met with the Vsba legal team this morning. There's one that we will be ready to issue in next week's. It'll be in the weekly update whenever we have a revision to share. There is one that has been through both equity review and legal policy review. So that one's ready to go. My understanding from our consultant working on this with us is by the end of this week, he will have 2 more for me to then bring back to the policy team. You know, I would just urge patience. We want to do the job diligently and really well so that it's useful. And so it is going to take us some time, but it's coming, I promise.
Okay, so if I could summarize, can assure the policy committee, and it's comprised of different stakeholders, that we'll be seeing that through the VSBA weekly updates when policy is ready for comparison to our local. But the work is diligent, going strong. Okay, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Colleen, I think another thing that you could do as well too is just, you know, we've now seen sort of some of the work that Sandra and her team are going through. I think it's perfectly fine to let folks know that you have personally seen the work that's going on, that there's a lot of stuff in progress, and that the fruits of that labor should be available, you know, ongoing and in the near future. You know, I think that's perfectly reasonable to be able to sort of report back on that individually as VSBA board members.
Okay, okay, thank you. And it's always a fine line between what's okay to say and what's not okay. What's,
Understood.
what to keep close to the vest and what's public.
Understood. But I
So
think to
thank
your
you.
point, I think this is one that we want folks to know that we are actively working on this.
Okay,
And that we are all aware of that.
thank you.
Gaston, A, it's so good to see you because I didn't think you're going to make it. And B,
Yeah.
let's have that question.
Yeah, thanks. No, I joined right about 6 o'clock, so I was able to listen to Elizabeth and the group talk about the new agreement. But anyway, thank you so much, Sandra, for this work. And the only comment that I'll make that sort of builds upon Colleen's statement is that I wonder if we couldn't share some of this, i.e. the new policy that has undergone a review through the equity lens, if we couldn't sort of share that with the task force so that they can see the positive work that's going on, because I know we talked about it. And so wouldn't it be a terrific strategy to sort of send that to them and say, hey, thought you might like to see this, but more is coming, and even perhaps share, that very nice chart that sort of shows exactly what's going on. I don't know. It just seems that may be of benefit going forward. Over. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaston. And sorry, just for my own clarification, when you say task force, which task force are we referring to?
Sorry, the Act One task force, the one that we've been working on. So yeah.
Okay.
Over.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on our equity work? All right. Seeing none, then Sue or Sandra, I see looks like there's one person entered the waiting room, but I do not recognize the name.
I don't recognize the name either.
I do not recognize the name either.
All right, do we want to admit, and then sometimes people are on weird devices sometimes and the names get.
Yeah, I'll let them in and you can ask them who they are.
Okay. Hey, so who just joined as Nadeau? Can I check? Nadeau, can you identify yourself, please, so we know who you are? All right, folks, I'm going to remove them. All right. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to maybe what folks are thinking is the highlight of the evening, is a review of the report of the task force on the implementation of pupil weighting factors. Just a show of hands. So this report only came out this morning. Can I see a show of hands of anybody who's looked at it, not read the full 80+ pages, but at least looked at it? Okay, kind of as I thought, just a handful of folks. So, I think with that, I'll open it up to see if folks have comments, positions on this. But given the fact that it was fairly long, Not everybody's had a chance to read it. I'm not inclined to come up with sort of an official board position on things this evening, but at least willing to have a discussion to find out, what people's thoughts are related to the report. And I'm going to turn to Mark because he's got his hand up.
Yeah, I actually have a question for Sue. Did the task force give you any guardrails on what they wanted you to testify about on Friday, or just a general commentary?
It was a general commentary. They said, let's see, provide reflections on their work, I think is what it was. I can go back and look at the email and see if that was the language. And that it was limited to 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's what they said to us also. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and so with that, Sue and I had a discussion today, and I think the message going into Friday is that the VSBA does not have an official position on this yet. But in talking with Sue, I said I thought it was perfectly reasonable, though, that some of the discussion that occurs this evening, some of the points that are made, we could certainly share those points, with the commission as items that were discussed at the VSBA board meeting on Wednesday night. But I will, we'll make it a point to highlight to that task force that we don't have an official position on the draft report yet as such. But with that, interested in folks have comments, reaction, anything they want to talk about with the report? You all are surprisingly quiet. Gaston.
Yeah, so when I looked at it, initially I was really taken when I looked at the weighting factor, what's going on, what was proposed, and what occurred to me was that, I'm not exactly certain what changing factors within the total formula does. So, there was something about secondary schools, and there was a factor for that went down. And I mean, it's just sort of like all over the place. And I was really confused as to, how changing all of the other factors besides waiting for poverty, how that affected the bottom line funding, because they're also talking about, stopping small schools grant and all of that. So I don't have a strong sense of what the net effect is of all of this, changing things around. Does that make sense? Over?
Yeah, no, I think it makes perfect sense, especially at the stage that we're at right now. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I am way far from being able to feel I have my arms around this thing. But, in particular, I was trying to, I couldn't spend as much time as I would have liked following the task force's work while they were doing it. But at the same time, there was this big push for this cost equity methodology. And honestly, that's their option too. And I'm not sure I really understand what the heck that is yet. And I'm not sure they've really explained it. I saw a whole lot of exhibits coming out associated with the task force work, and nowhere was I, Mark's been closer to it, but nowhere did I really find, I have a sense of what it is, but I'm not sure if I went and tried to explain it that I would be explaining it correctly. So I think, the whole, they spent a whole lot of time on this, and honestly, the information they provided, I have to, my personal opinion is it's a little bit lacking in terms of allowing people to understand what they were coming up with, and their expectation for people to be able to turn around immediately and respond to this is kind of absurd. So I think I feel very uncomfortable trying to take a position and personally in responding to this when I can't say I really understand it. And I think that's going to be, most people are going to have a hard time really understanding this report, potentially even in some of the people on the task force, so they haven't even, also just to point out that, the report that came out said, executive summary, in process, so it's, they haven't even worked through that. So I think it would be way too early for us to give any, hard and fast answers as to, our responses. We could say that, it would be very helpful if they communicated a lot more clearly. That would be appreciated.
Thanks, Jim. Mark, go ahead.
So I guess my first suggestion would be, we have a number of motions that this board passed, as well as the resolution that was passed by the VSBA membership. So I think I'd start there. I agree completely with Jim that the time frame, sending this out on Wednesday morning and expecting people to testify on Friday morning, is wholly insufficient. I don't know that there's much that can be done about that, since they do have a December 15th deadline, but I do agree with that. For Gaston, I think I might be able to help explain some of those changes that they're looking at. Are you referring to the policy changes that they made that adjusted the weights, or?
Yeah, it's just that when you look at the final formula, they've adjusted certain things, and when one goes up and several other go down, you're sort of left with, okay, so what does that really mean? Are we just taking the same pot of money and sort of reshuffling the deck, as it were, and saying that, we're giving more to poverty, but we're taking away all this other stuff? It's just not clear for me exactly what the bottom line will be in terms of funding for our schools with high poverty rates. Over.
The in their remodeled weights, which they requested from Colby and her team, the poverty weight actually went down significantly. Part of that's because they pulled ELL out of it, and part of it is because they changed to free and reduced lunch as their measurement for poverty versus the SNAP plus a couple other things that the AOE uses. And that created a much larger pool of students that are in poverty. Therefore, it reduced the effect of the poverty weight on the individual students. They made 3 policy changes. The first one is the change of poverty to free and reduced lunch. The second was pulling ELL out of the poverty count. And the third is changing from a multiplicative effect to an additive effect for poverty. Effectively, what that does is it reduces the differentiation between the value of the weight for different grade levels. So their argument is that it doesn't cost more to educate a high school student in poverty than it does an elementary school student in poverty. So they want a flat amount going regardless of the grade level. And because of those 3 policy changes, Colby and her team had to do a complete new model based on the same data that they used for the other modeling, but that provided the new weights. I hope that clarifies it a little bit. And also, Colby and her team will be releasing a memo in the coming days, which will probably help answer a lot of questions that are coming up now. I don't know exactly what is going to be in that memo, but we've been assured that it's going to help answer a lot of our questions.
And Mark, did you have any input on the report itself, or did you just want to answer Gaston's questions because I got Dave and I got Mark Clough up as well too to speak. So I just want to make sure
I appreciate that. Yeah, I had raised my hand just to answer questions at this point.
okay. Dave Sharp, go ahead.
Thanks. So it's important. I'm grateful that that the committee has broadened their scope of investigation. I think the directive to Colby and the research team was entirely too narrow, and the 3 policy changes they have agreed to seem reasonable to me. I strongly supported or advocated for changing to free and reduced price lunch, because counting families, if you have a family of 6 kids in school and you count them as one, then you're distorting your poverty count in the community, and so, or in the school system. So I thought the free and reduced price lunch change was appropriate. I don't know particularly about the others. I think it's important to remember that we started weighting students in Vermont in the early 1900s. I think 1906 comes to mind, but I could be off by a year or two. And almost all of the weights from then until the present have been relatively arbitrary. So this is really the first look at the various weights. The high school weight, I was there when we did that. That was entirely arbitrary. And just on the notion that it costs more to educate a high school student. All right, we don't know if that's true or not. No research went into that. So the asking or having the committee take a more comprehensive look at how we, as Gaston said, divvy up the pot of money, because that's what we're doing. We're divvying up the tax base by weighting students differently. And so I thought it was entirely appropriate. Do I agree with everything they did? Probably not. And I haven't really had time to look at it in detail. But I think it is a wise decision to look at this in a more broader lens and say, hey, look, much of these, they did some multiplicative, if that's a word, weights and some additive weights, and there was no logic or sense to that. So looking at it in a more holistic frame with some research behind it really makes a whole lot of sense. And it's far from over on December 15th, because this is going to have a whole lot to do with legislative session and the politics within the building itself. So this has a long way to go. But I'm basically appreciative of the approach that the committee has taken. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Mark Clough, go ahead.
I guess I take a little different tack than David does. I had thought that when you did this study and it was researched and looked at, and maybe I'm being very naive about the political aspects of it, and also the issue that we all have when we get in front of the taxpayers at town meetings and try to explain educational funding, why they took it upon themselves to make this more complicated and decide to fool with what was a good, narrowly focused study. And I'm just not going to be naive about the politics. But I guess I am being. We needed to make this a simpler process, and I thought we were on the right track, and I believe they've gotten off the rails. And we're talking to a lot of people in the committees at the legislature about our disappointment around where they went with this. And just in terms of, changing the process of what I think they were asked to do. Just one opinion.
Thank you, Mark. The other Mark Schauber.
So I agree with everything Mark just said. And I'll add that in the report, they state that they spent the first 6 meetings of their 12 essentially fact-finding. And therefore, they took 6 meetings to completely upend the entire Act 60 formula and try to revamp that into what they're calling their cost equity formula, which is probably a process that, if that was to be done, requires its own study and multiple years of preparing. And they try to do this in 6 5-hour meetings, which I think is one of the biggest problems with the cost equity formula and why people don't understand it. In many ways, it's not understandable. The task force has not provided actual calculations or their method for calculating the actual dollar amounts that they are recommending. And I do believe that part of what is going to be coming in Tammy's memo may be proper calculations for those. I'm not positive about that, but that may be coming. But they took a process that should have been relatively simple. The title of their task force is Implementation of the People Weighting Factors Report, and made it into something a whole lot more. I mean, Dave's right. This is going to be legislated out during the session. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs for it, but yeah. So, not that you all don't already know where I stand on this issue.
Thanks, Mark. Let me go to Jim.
There we go. Okay. No, I thought, for the whole crew, maybe, because I've tried to understand a lot of this stuff, and I've spent some time on it, not nearly as much time as Mark has. And so I thought maybe I'd propose my very simple understanding of kind of what this cost equity thing is, and see whether that kind of jives with Mark's read, since he's spent more time on it, and Sue as well, because Sue knows more than me as well. But basically, it seems like, the weights, the new weights were weights that were calculated to fit into the existing funding structure, and just replace the old weights and make more sense. The cost equity, the impression I got is basically they're trying to take those weights and turn them into dollar amounts, and then apply those dollar amounts to funding and get rid of the weighting system. That's my very simplistic. Is that at all fair? Based on what other people are saying. Mark's giving it a semi, but maybe you could just give a quick what you understand it to be, would be just useful for me in trying to get my arms around it.
Yeah, well, so what I would say is what I am generally hearing here is probably kind of what I thought I would hear, is that there's a lot to this report that folks haven't had their chance to wrap their heads around, and a lot of unanswered questions. And I think probably what we really need, and Sue and I had talked about this before, is to get, either a Tammy Colby or somebody else in front of this board, so that we could ask these questions and get answers, so that we can all hear them at the same time, right? Rather than, and this is a great body, because all you guys are crazy smart, right? But we're somewhat relying on everybody else who might have had a chance to read the report or maybe attend meetings to be able to impart some of that knowledge. And I wonder if it just makes more sense to get it straight from some of the folks that did the work on this. With that, Don had his hand up, and so I'm going to go to Don.
Yeah, Neil, I just want to add my voice to Mark Clough's. I thought, and I remember when Tammy first spoke at a VSBA meeting, I think 3 years ago in Fairleigh, that this was something needed addressing, that it wasn't simple, but as they worked forward, it seemed like maybe this group could narrow the scope and keep it pretty simple. But my parting shot is, if you haven't read, and probably all have, but the business manager in Winooski, who we know quite well, and the superintendent in Winooski, and George Cross, a former superintendent in Winooski, has commented. And I think their message is that this group has kind of gotten out of the lane they're supposed to be in, and are taking on things that really aren't relevant to the discussion that we thought we were going to have. So that's it.
Thank you, Don. Floor, go ahead.
I think my points have been kind of taken by, yeah, trying to invite somebody was what I was gonna say. And then as far, I read the report, but I was doing the same mistake that most people are doing, right? I immediately went to the charts and I wanted to translate it to money, to what it was gonna, what the harm was gonna be, and not look at it holistic. I think that as a board, we all, I agree, we passed that resolution. We all agree on the equity. I don't think we have disagreement on that. It's just like, it's more complicated that it is. So I didn't have time to have a informed opinion. I would love like a graphic presentation of just the highlights. My initial thing was go to the graph and find a conclusion, and the conclusion was not there. So I just looked at the graph. So that's my take on it.
Thanks, Flor. Mark Schauber, go ahead.
I just want to take 2 minutes and sort of answer what Jim, are you there? Yeah, there you are. What Jim asked. In essence, what you described for the cost equity is correct. The difference between it and using weights, though, is that the cost equity formula takes the average in each category that is spent throughout the state, and that is a dollar figure that they're applying to that category. So regardless of what corner of the state you're in, your poverty count, your ELL count, or anything, everybody across the state's going to be getting the same amount of money per student per category. So cost equity formula is a misnomer. It's cost equality formula. So it actually, that's what it is. You're going to get the same amount. So that's just one step beyond what you were saying, Jim.
Thank you, Mark. Dave Sharp.
Yeah, thanks. So I've ate, slept, and drank school finance for 20 years. And initially on the Ways and Means Committee, and then later on the Education Committee. So it is complicated. Any tax policy is, and sort of the shorthand that we often spoke of in Ways and Means was, taxes can be simple but unfair, and fair but complex, and you can't have it both ways. And the initial bill that generated the study that Tammy Colby did was the pressure in the legislature was about rurality and the notion that rural kids weren't getting a fair shake. Had a little bit to do with poverty, but mostly it was about rural kids. And that generated a study that Tammy Colby was asked to do that was very narrow. And she returned the information, the data she was asked to generate, did an excellent job, I thought. The charge to the task force when they were formed was a recognition on the part of the legislature that this was a whole lot bigger than one or two categories of student weighting, that the whole system, there's been pressure in the legislature for years, every year, for as long as I can remember, that that the system was unfair and that had to be redone, and Act 60 was crazy, and that Act 68 was worse, and we had to fix it. And there have been proposals from all corners of the state to redo what was in Act 60 and 68. So the charge to this task force was extraordinarily broad. It was not just fix the poverty weight, although that's the way many people saw it. The actual charge to the committee was fix the finance system. And so they have done a yeoman's task, I believe. Like I said, I don't know as I'm going to agree or disagree with various elements of it, I think the committee has really done what was asked of it in the charge to that committee.
Thanks, Dave. So I think generally what I'm hearing from this board is not enough time to review what's been provided. B, for those that did have a chance to review it, still some uncertainty and some questions related to that material. I know one of the things that I think the legislative leaders on that task force were hoping to hear from VSBA was thoughts related to implementation. And in my mind, I think it's even premature to talk about that because I think it depends on, what it is that is being implemented, and then how that implementation is going to work. What would the mechanics be? But I wanted to make sure that, board members were aware of one of the items that the task force leadership was asking of VSBA for input on. But I'm inclined, based on what I've been hearing from all of you tonight, is just to lump that in with everything else. And too early to tell. We haven't had a chance to fully review it. And B, even after we've reviewed it, we think we're still going to have a whole bunch of questions that are going to need answers before we can form an opinion on this. Does anybody disagree with how I've sort of captured things this evening?
So Neil, I forgot to say that I fully support your notion of bringing people in to present. I think Tammy Colby would be excellent. I also think one of the co-chairs, either Representative Kornheiser or Representative Senator Hardy from that task force, it would be great to have them present to our board and be able to ask them questions.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else have any other thoughts that they wanted to share on this? Or Sue, maybe I should check in with you. I know that you don't have much substance to go with for the meeting on Friday, but do you think you've got a general, hopefully we've narrowed it down enough for you to provide some information back to the task force?
Yes, I think so. And I don't think I'll be the only one giving them that message.
Yeah, kind of figured. Mark Clough, go ahead.
Just quickly, knowing a couple of the folks on the task force and hearing them speak, they had said that the weighting was really going to have a large movement with the poverty and that they were going to have to scale or phase in the changes over time. So truly not having the executive summary and what this all looks like. I mean, I agree with your summary. We really need to wait and see. And they can't ask us to have a position this early. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we go with that, and then all of you just need to recognize then that we'll probably be back at this in January, right? So hopefully we'll have some time maybe to digest the report, and certainly we'll work with Sue to see if we can get some resources to come forward for this body to be able to clarify some stuff in the report and any questions that this group would have. But sounds like that's our game plan going forward. So if there isn't anything else on that topic, then we're going to move ahead then to State Board Rule 2200 series rulemaking and hear an update on that work.
Okay, so included in your packet is a memo submitted as public comment to the State Board's Rule 2200 series rulemaking. That rule series addresses independent school approval. The memo includes one of the VSBA resolutions that was adopted on November 4th. And after that, there were some questions about the applicability of the resolution to the draft rules. And so a follow-up memorandum was submitted to the State Board subcommittee handling that rulemaking, illustrating how the resolution relates to specific points that were made by others in their public comments. There was quite a significant amount of public comment that was filed. Also included in your packet is a memo from the chair of the state board outlining how the state board subcommittee is going to handle the many public comments that it received. And that review process is ongoing. I do receive invitations to those meetings. That I know there was one today. I was not able to attend the meeting today due to another meeting that had been previously scheduled. But I will keep you updated on the status, but just wanted to make sure that you saw those memos.
Any board members have any questions on the 2200 series rulemaking? All right.
Just in full disclosure, I'm on that subcommittee on the state board, and today we just worked through a few more of the comments. So in alignment with what was in the chair's letter, there are some that are definitely going back to the advisory group for their thoughts, and we are actually considering every comment and deciding which of those are better handled by the advisory group and which we can work through as a subcommittee. So
Thanks for that, Kim. Any other comments or questions from board members? All right, seeing none, then let's go on to the strategic plan monitoring report and get a quick overview of what the staff have been busy with over the last month, I should say.
So there were really two things I wanted to highlight from the report. The first one is that Susan is retiring at the end of December. And so we're in our last few weeks with her. As you all know very well, Susan is really a highly valued member of our team. We're going to miss her so much. She's an avid skier and sailor, so we know she's going to have a lot of outdoor adventures in her retirement. And I know we'll be sort of ending the meeting appreciating Susan, but wanted to let you know, follow up on the email that I sent you to let you know that Phil Gore is going to be joining the VSBA as the new Director of Board Services. He's coming to us from the Texas Association of School Boards, where he is currently serving as the Division Director of Board Development Services, and he's been with that Texas Association since 2014. Before that, he was Director of Leadership Development Services for the State of Washington School Directors Association, and he was also worked for the Nsba for a time in between there before he went to Texas. He is a nationally recognized researcher and keynote speaker on school governance, so he has a lot of knowledge about school governance and a lot of experience working with school boards. So we're really excited to welcome him to the VSBA. His first day is going to be March 16th, and he'll be starting, he'll be in Texas when he starts on March 16th, but by the beginning of April, he'll be in Vermont. He's actually headed to Vermont this weekend to look for property. So we have set up a system where we'll be taking requests for board trainings with Phil for his spring board trainings. In the meantime, between the time that Susan leaves and the time that he starts, but we don't plan to do any board trainings during the months of January and February because we do not have anyone to do them, especially with the legislature in session. The next thing I wanted to highlight from the report was that we held a webinar on November 16th on effective and appropriate management of school board meetings. And I wanted to make sure that if you did not attend the webinar, I would highly encourage you to watch it. It is accessible right on the VSBA homepage. It's got a lot of good practical advice on how to manage contentious public comment sessions with strategies for how to respond if things get a little bit disruptive. And speakers on the panel were Attorney Pietro Lynn, John Donnelly, who's a psychologist, Michael Sherling, the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Public Safety, Zach McLaughlin, Superintendent for the Springfield School District, and then we had 3 school board chairs, which were Mary Niles, Rory Tebow, and Elizabeth Burrows. We always do a survey after our webinars as people are leaving the webinar, and we got all the evaluations listed it as great. And some of the quotes were, the webinar was informative, instructive, and useful. Thanks to all the panelists for sharing their expertise, timely and relevant. Everyone contributed something useful. I particularly appreciated the caution about trying to answer questions from the public during a meeting. I was a trial lawyer for 35 years and still learned a lot. So definitely encourage everyone to listen to that webinar. And there's also slides and the suggested meeting management language for board chairs. So if you're a board chair, take a look at that meeting management language. There's language for pre-public comment to sort of set the tone. There's language for what you do if there is a disruption and you need to pause your meeting, how you handle that under Robert's rules quickly. And there's also language for how you actually, like if you had a really emergency kind of a situation, how you would shut down the meeting. So I think every board chair would be served well by having that language, right with them during the meeting in case they need it. So those are the highlights that I wanted to pull out of the strategic plan monitoring report, but there's a lot in there. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Sue. And it's always amazing to me how much work is going on with such a small staff. And yes, we will say a grand goodbye to Susan, but first, let's see if we can get through that consent agenda that we had. So if anybody would care to make a motion, I would be willing to entertain it.
I'll move that we approve the minutes of November 10th.
All right. Is there a second to that motion? Oh, come on, don't be shy. Gaston, he's got his hand up for the second. Any further discussion on it? Seeing none, then all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please let me know, raise your hand. Awesome. I think I saw that was unanimous. Perfect. All right. New business. Susan, are you still with us?
I am.
Well, I want to say, congratulations. I think you're probably going to be moving on from here to do something far more exciting, although VSBA work is exciting, but I think far more exciting, far more entertaining, and probably definitely far more relaxing than what you have been doing for us. But a huge thank you to all of the work that you've done since taking on this position with VSBA, the countless board members that you've trained, the webinars that you've organized and run, the advice that you've provided to board members, the assistance that you've provided to this board. I know that I am somehow forgetting things, but we really, really appreciate it. And I actually hope that one day I might be able to get onto that sailboat.
Well, I'd like to say it's not going anywhere, but I hope it's going lots of places. However, it will continue to live on Lake Champlain and Burlington, so there's a good chance of that.
Any immediate plans?
Immediate plans involve skiing, not sailing. 3 weeks in Colorado, where both my kids are currently living. So I might catch a glimpse of them, but they slow down enough for me on the slopes. I'm not so sure they're inclined to do that, but I am looking forward to that and to the relaxation. It's been a phenomenal 4+ years. Never dull, and especially of late, where the issues have sometimes even surprised me, and I thought I was beyond that. I think that I continue to think that all of the work that board members do is amazing, and we're in particularly challenging times now. I'm not going to say, oh, thank you. I'm not going to say that I'm going to miss dealing with some of those really grisly issues that have been coming up lately. And I will continue to watch them, but I just think that you all are amazing. And thank you for all of the energy that you put into Vermont's education. I hate to think what it might look like without that.
Well, thank you so much. When's your official last day? Is it the last day of the year?
It is, except I think that's a holiday. So that'd be the 30th.
I sure hope it's a holiday. I think I'm planning on having that one off. So
yeah.
Well, awesome.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank
you, Susan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you all. You've really you've made my experience at VSBA be meaningful. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
All right. So you can go ahead and turn off that camera now. You can get back to your drink or whatever else you were having.
I wish it was that. No, I actually started the meeting by phone because I was on my way to Connecticut, where my 91-year-old mother just slipped and fell in the bathtub. And I'm bringing a friend to his cardiology appointment tomorrow. So yeah, full day.
Oh my goodness.
But
Right.
the drink sounds like a great idea. Thank you.
And I think we're not going to assume that the rest of retirement is going to be similar to this. So
No, not at all. This is not, I'm not retired yet.
Awesome. Well, we wish you the best of luck. Hopefully, maybe we'll see you again in the future. Our paths will cross maybe at some point. But please leave VSBA knowing we greatly appreciated your work, and we definitely want you to enjoy your retirement.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who just can't stand to say goodbyes, I actually have committed to running the February webinar in absence of anybody else to do it. So I'm going to be a stand-in on that day.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Any other new business for this evening? Oh, Mark, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank all of you who attended the coalition's panel discussion on the future of equity in Vermont education 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. I don't know. I lose track of time, but thank you all for attending.
Sure. It was very, very nicely done, Mark. Anything else from board members? All right. Well, I hope all of you guys have a chance to take a break, relax. This has been a crazy year for board members, and I really appreciate everything that you guys have done. You make this group really easy to work with, man. If every board was like this, I think our state would be in an amazing position. But I am comforted knowing that each of you go back to your own individual boards to make it, that much better. So take a break, do something fun. Stop thinking about this stuff for a little while and just relax. We all need it. All right, go start doing that now. Don't stick around here anymore. Go do it now.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
motion to adjourn, made by the chair this time.
Seconded by Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keeping us honest, Sandra.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.